You're listening to Weekdays with Josh and Cole. Guys, welcome back to another episode of Weekdays with Josh and Cole. Cole, we had something kind of cool happen here today, and I want to talk about that because we're really only going to have a one-segment show today, and it's for a good reason. It's interesting what we just got to experience, and our primary focus for the whole show today is going to be NASCAR, because NASCAR's kind of, I don't want to say breaking the barrier, but it's coming back.
It's the only sport we have to watch.
Seriously, UFC and NASCAR are the ones that are brave enough, I dare say, to come back and bring back what America needs right now. And that is a sport. America needs a sport right now. So, Cole, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you because we had a special guest today that we're going to be listening to from the Kreckman and Lindahl show earlier. And Cole, let's talk about this. What stood out to you from a great interview with Larry McReynolds?
Larry McReynolds, the legend crew chief and color commentator for every single NASCAR race you see on FS1, Fox, NBC.
Also,
he's everywhere.
The movie Cars and Talladega Nights.
That's where most of you will recognize Larry McReynolds. Yes. He was on Talladega Nights. He was also the voice in multiple Cars movies.
Yep.
And in this interview, we even get a little insider look into how those were recorded, him meeting Will Ferrell, and that whole process of how those movies even got made. This interview is fantastic. If you want to learn about NASCAR, if you want to get a really good 101 of what to look for at Darlington, South Carolina this weekend, Larry McReynolds joined Kreckman and Lindahl on Altitude Sports Radio 92.5 earlier today. And guys, this interview is fantastic.
Larry, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Hope you guys are all safe and well.
We are safe and well. We're so excited to have you here on the program, Larry. Now, full disclaimer, as we begin this interview, when it comes to NASCAR, Andy and myself, Nate Kreckman, we are idiots. However, we are dying for live sports. We can't wait to watch the race coming up on Sunday. You will be on the broadcast, but just know that we are coming from a place of complete, well, as usual, complete and total stupidity about what it is you guys do.
Well, now, Nate, you're cutting yourself short because a little birdie told me you guys have been doing some studying on NASCAR, so it sounds like you've been on a quick trip to learn as much as you can here over the last few days.
We're doing our best, and, first off, the listeners told us Larry Mack, so we're making sure that we're doing that right there. Also, I got called out a couple of days ago. Now, Larry is referring to the car as a NASCAR. Is that the biggest cardinal sin for a NASCAR fan?
Yeah, because you have to add some words to it to be right. It's a NASCAR Cup Series car. NASCAR itself, obviously, is the sanctioning body, the governing body, but you have to add Cup Series car for it to be complete proper. But people know what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm on the right path. That's all I can ask for. All right, Larry, let's dig into this a little bit because I'm looking forward to watching the race coming up on Sunday at Darlington. Now, of what I know, Darlington is a technically difficult oval. It's an old school course. Tell us, what is Darlington Raceway like?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest tracks that we go to on the NASCAR schedule. It had its first race, I think, in 1950, and of the 23 tracks that we go to, it is definitely the toughest. When it was built back in 1949 or 1950, I think the pole speed was like 80-something miles per hour average. It's a mile and a third track, and the two ends are totally different. It's shaped like an egg. One end is much narrower than the other end, but it's pretty much a one-groove racetrack. So 1950 pole speed, around 80, 83, 84 miles per hour. Now they're running around this same racetrack. They haven't changed the track. Rules have changed. Cars have gotten better, more horsepower. Everything's a lot better than what it used to be as it is in all sports. And now they're running around this mile and a third racetrack at roughly 180-something miles per hour. So over 100 miles per hour gain in average speed, but yet it's the same racetrack. It is a very tricky, technical racetrack, and an element that's going to be added to this race this Sunday on Fox at 3 p.m. Eastern Time is no practice, no qualifying. They're going to line them up, throw the green flag, and we're going to go racing for 400 miles down there in South Carolina.
Yeah, cold turkey on the green flag. What is that going to be like for these drivers, for these crews?
Well, you think about, they haven't been in a race car when the green flag waved Sunday, it would have been 70 days since the checkered flag waved at Phoenix right before this pandemic really reared its head. And if you were going to some racetracks, it still would be a big deal not to get a single practice lap, but more so at Darlington, because to my point, I think it takes drivers several laps to get acclimated to that place. And when we would do a normal schedule there and we would have practice on Friday and Saturday, we would always keep up with what we called the stripe total. And what the stripe total was is how many cars scraped the wall even in practice. So hopefully these 40 drivers, when we do wave the green flag, they'll respect that place. It has a lot of nicknames. The Lady in Black, the track that's too tough to tame, and the list goes on and on and on. Hopefully they'll respect that racetrack, let some laps get under their belt, get acclimated, and then get after it, because even 400 miles, that is a long, long race, 293 laps around that mile and a third racetrack.
So, Larry, as a crew chief, what kind of info are you being deprived of? What are you now missing when you don't get the practice laps in?
Well, things have changed so much since my days as a crew chief. You know, my last year as a crew chief before I made the move to the broadcast booth with Fox was 2000. And today these crew chiefs have so many tools at their disposal that they set these cars up by before they ever even get to the racetrack. They have simulation programs. They put them on rigs that simulates the car going around the racetrack. So they're able to get these cars pretty darn close before they unload them. Honestly, when they unload normally at a racetrack, it's just fine-tuning. So now they're going to have to start doing their fine-tuning as they make trips to pit road during a pit stop rather than do it during practice. 20 years ago, I probably would have a lot of sleepless nights because wondering how in the world my race car was going to be when they dropped that green flag. I still think there's a lot of nervous people about that, but I think it's a lot less apprehension just because of the tools they have to set these cars up at the shop before they ever even put them in the haulers.
Sunday at 1:30, NASCAR at Darlington. NASCAR on Fox. Larry McReynolds, Larry Mack, is our guest. All right, Larry, let's talk a little bit about NASCAR now in the age of coronavirus, because typically you would have a jam-packed grandstand and a jam-packed infield, and you would have media, and you would have family, and you would have broadcast, everything that goes along with putting on a big-time sporting event. No fans are going to be at Darlington coming up on Sunday. So how is this going to work? How many people are going to be involved in at the racetrack on Sunday between drivers and crew and officials? How many people are going to work this race?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even really know how many people we're going to have there as far as our broadcast team. I know all of the broadcasters, including myself, Jeff Gordon, and Mike Joy, we're going to be in the Charlotte FS1 studio, and we will be social distance. That's one thing our bosses at Fox and FS1, they've laid the law down from day one. If we're going to do this, we're excited about doing it, but we're not going to turn our back on the safety of our people and the safety of the community that we're going to race in. Each team, including the driver, including the spotter, the crew chief, the hauler drivers, each cup team is allowed 16 crew members. Now, I think some of the smaller teams, they probably won't have a full roster there. So, you know, there's still going to be, you know, I would say in the neighborhood of 250, 300 people there. But NASCAR, the Darlington racetrack, my bosses at Fox, and the list goes on and on and on. They are still going to 100% abide by the state's governing laws right now as far as mass gatherings. The health and safety of everybody involved, I know for a fact is the number one thing. And honestly, this is one reason why there's not going to be any practice or any qualifying, because if you practice, you run the chance of wrecking in practice, and then you have to unload a backup car. Then you have to have a lot of people working on a car. So they felt like in the beginning, and this is what we're going to do basically 3 of the first 4 races, the 2 at Darlington and 1 of the Charlotte races, and then the other Charlotte race, the Coke 600, that's going to be run on Sunday, May 24th, we're going to do qualifying only, still no practice. They just felt like the least amount of time that we're going to be at that racetrack, still put on a good race for our fans, then that's probably the safest way we can go, because, again, nobody involved with this is turning their back or their head on the things that we need to do to try to fight this pandemic off.
In addition to fewer bodies, what are some of the other health precautions they'll be taking at the track?
Well, for example, the drivers. One good thing about racing at Darlington and racing at Charlotte, and I think you even see this with some of the tracks that got added just about an hour ago. They've added Bristol on Sunday, May 31st, Atlanta on Sunday, June 7th, Martinsville, another short track on Wednesday, June 10th. Those 3 tracks in Charlotte and Darlington, all of them are within driving distance, a short drive from Charlotte. And that's where all the teams and all the drivers, that's where they all live and call home. So they've made it where, with a one-day show, with doing the race only, that the drivers, the crew members, even Regan Smith, that's going to be our one pit reporter that we'll have on site there, they can get up early, drive to the racetrack, run the race, and come back home. No airplanes, no hotels, no rental cars, no restaurants. It's almost like it's just a long day at the shop. But everybody in the venue is going to be required to wear masks. Everybody is going to be tested on a pretty regular basis through temperature checks and other testing that they do. And the driver, he's going to be in his motorhome in the infield, and he cannot come out of that motorhome until 10 minutes before the race and walk straight to his race car, get in it, run the race, get out, go back to his motorhome, and come back to Charlotte. So I promise you, there is a lot of work and a lot of thought by a lot of people that's went into pulling these events off and do it in a very safe manner.
Larry, it appears some races will be a little bit closer together. What kind of a toll do you think this year is going to have on the drivers just trying to do the job of the racing? Is it hard to run races without that full week's time or whatever back-to-back?
Well, and we're starting to get into some hot temperatures. You know, just at Darlington this Sunday, it's supposed to be 89 degrees. And I do think our drivers, versus even my years as a crew chief, they're a lot more physically fit. You know, their hydration, all of those things are going to be it's going to be have to be at the top of the chart. But yeah, you know, I know some drivers, when you run a 500-mile race on Sunday in extreme heat, it almost takes to Wednesday or Thursday before you totally get over it. But I just think it's going to take some extra effort on these drivers and the crew members, for that matter, to pull this off. The good thing is, we're in normal times, we're at most of these racetracks for 3 days of activities by one series, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the Cup Series, practice, qualifying, and race. Now these weekends for all the 3 series will absolutely be one-day events.
We are talking to Larry Mack, NASCAR on Fox, getting ready for NASCAR at Darlington coming up on Sunday and getting a good education in the sport. Now, Larry, obviously we're in these weird times right now, and so, you know, the first race in the age of COVID-19 really is the story, but there's another massive story in that Ryan Newman is going to drive, is going to race coming up this Sunday at Darlington. How big of a storyline is this going into this race as you guys prepare to do the broadcast?
Well, I go back roughly 3 months ago, coming to the checkered flag in the Daytona 500, that wreck that Ryan Newman had with the checkered flag waving. And Shannon Spake, Jamie McMurray, and myself had to do a post-race Daytona show, and we were almost at a loss for words because we had no idea what Ryan Newman's status was, absolutely none whatsoever. And then to see him walk out of that Florida hospital less than 3 days later with his 2 daughters in hand, and to know now that roughly 3 months later, he's going to be back in that 6 car for Roush Fenway Racing, to me, it's something just short of a miracle. And I know you talked about 1:30 Mountain Time on Sunday. If you tune in at 1 p.m. Mountain Time on Sunday on Fox, we've got about a 30-minute pre-race show, and a big part of our focus is going to be on Ryan Newman.
Larry, I got to ask you, first off, I must admit, hearing your voice, I could have sworn you were the color analyst in Cars, the movie, and my kids love that movie. So I've gone to IMDb to see if I was right, but it turns out you were in Talladega Nights. Tell me what that experience was like for you. Did you enjoy making a movie about NASCAR?
Well, I did. And, Mike Joy, Darrell Waltrip, and myself, who was in the Fox broadcast booth together for roughly 15 years before my role changed when Jeff Gordon came on board. Of course, DW retired at the end of last year. We portrayed ourselves as announcers at 2 different races that was in that movie. And probably the neatest thing, our roles were very short. They gave us a script, and the 3 of us looked at the producer and said, the script you've given us is not really the real deal. Do you mind if we just wing it with what we would normally say? And he said, absolutely. And then once we did it, he absolutely loved it. But we did get to meet Will Ferrell. And the one thing that I will say, you see Will Ferrell in movies and on television and different shows. The Will Ferrell that I met in person is totally different from the Will Ferrell that you see on screen. Very humble, almost kind of a quiet individual. I was really shocked and surprised, but it was very neat to meet him and very flattering to even though it was 2 small scenes that the 3 of us did, to be a part of that. And the neat thing is it's still showing. And even though the commas have moved in the residual checks, we still get residual checks every quarter.
Every time
I watch
that
it, I
thing's
think
on
every
TBS.
Sunday on TBS. It's always on TBS. So
Yeah, if they get much smaller, though, I think I'm going to actually owe them.
All right, Larry, how important is this race and really these next few weeks here for NASCAR as there's no other, big-time American sports getting played? We had a UFC event, but now that NASCAR is back, there's a captive audience. In recent years, they've talked about declining television ratings, declining sponsorship dollars, declining attendance in NASCAR, and yet you look at the audiences that were there for the iRacing events that were done, the esports version of it, and they were massive, the people that were watching this thing. The return of NASCAR now here in mid-May, how big is this for the sport, for the entity?
Yeah, I was actually telling someone earlier, I think if you're passionate about the sport, you get ramped up and energized before any race weekend. But I think there are some races that the anxiety and the energy is a little more. I think every year when we get ready to go to Daytona to start a new season and get ready for the Daytona 500, there's a lot of anticipation for that race. I go back a couple of years ago when we first ran the Roval here at Charlotte Motor Speedway. There was a ton of anticipation about that race because it was something that had never been done. I even think back to 1994 when we first took NASCAR to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A ton of anticipation for that race. But I think because of all the reasons surrounding us making this return this Sunday at Darlington, this could be the most anticipated race that we have seen in a long, long time in the sport of NASCAR. And you're right, we're going to be the only game in town, not to downplay UFC or Korean baseball, but we are truly the first major sport to come back with live sporting events, even though it's going to be without fans. And when I do look at what we accomplished with the iRacing, which I tip my hat to the folks at iRacing and my bosses with NASCAR on Fox, 3 of those 7 events you talked about, we had close to 1.3 million households that tuned in. And I don't know how they measure this stuff, but 20 to 25% of our viewers, every one of those iRacing events, they were tuning in to a NASCAR-related event for the first time ever in 2020. So I think we have an opportunity to really have a large captive audience starting this Sunday at Darlington. And I honestly think we've already created and generated some new NASCAR fans just because of what we did with iRacing.
All right, I'll end it on two quick ones. We appreciate your time, Larry. First off, Joe from Thornton, that's a city around here in Denver, wants to know, how did they draw the poll, or how did they figure out who would have the poll? And another listener would like to know, who do you like?
Well, if you tune in to FS1 in about 40 minutes on Race Hub, it's going to be a special edition, and they're going to do a random draw. You know, they're not going to line them up by points. They're not going to just, do a random draw for the entire field. They're going to kind of break the field up, and I think they're smart what they're doing. So the top 12 in points, they're locked into the top 12 positions, but it will be a random draw. In other words, Kevin Harvick, who's the points leader, he could draw first, he could draw fifth, he could draw 12th. And then they'll go to the next 12 in points, 13 through 24, and they'll do a random draw. And then the back half of the field, they'll do a random draw, and that's how they'll line them up on Sunday. But what's going to be interesting, remember, we're right back at Darlington next Wednesday, a week from last night on May the 20th, and how they'll line them up for that race is the top 20 finishers for this Sunday, they're going to invert them. So whoever wins the race will start 20th, and then 21 through 40 will be lined up exactly how they finish. So they're doing some unique things, and I think it's cool. They're not just lining them up by points every week. And you asked me who I like. I look at Joe Gibbs Racing. I think I mentioned it earlier. They won 19 of the 36 races last year and picked right where they left off by Denny Hamlin winning the Daytona 500. But it's been a little bit of a soft run for them the following three races. Joe Gibbs Racing, they've won 5 of the last 7 races at Darlington, including Eric Jones winning there last September in the Southern 500. Kyle Busch has been phenomenal there. I know he only has the one Cup win back in 2008, but I would keep my eye on that number 18 M&M's car this Sunday.
Larry, last thing. How do we choose a driver? How do we pick a favorite? As total rookies, how do we get into this and pick our guy?
Well, what I would do on Sunday, we're going to handle this broadcast a little different. Yeah, we're going to broadcast a race, but we're going to try to tell stories about these drivers. You know, I'm a sports fan, and when I tune into a sport that I'm not that familiar with, when the broadcasters or analysts tells me something outside of what that athlete's doing, maybe about his background, maybe about his family, maybe about things he likes outside of racing. So what I would encourage you to do is tune in on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, and we'll give you reasons to pull for a particular driver, regardless of where he's running on the racetrack.
Real quickly, then, can you tell us something about Clint Boyer? I met him at a couple of the Super Bowls we covered. Seems like a nice guy. Where does Clint Boyer fall? Popular driver?
He is, and he's the Rob Gronkowski of NASCAR. He maybe has only won 10 Cup races, but I can promise you he's never lost a party.
That's our kind of dude. Coming up on Sunday, 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Tune into Fox. Larry Mack, NASCAR on Fox. Larry, just an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the race coming up on Sunday.
All right, we appreciate it. And, again, tune in this Sunday, and we got a lot of racing over the next couple of months. In fact, you look at the next 11 days starting with this Sunday, there'll be 4 Cup races plus Xfinity and trucks scattered in. So just tune in to Fox or FS1, and you will get your feel. I promise you, Nate and Andy, you'll learn all you need to know about NASCAR over the next couple of months.
Can't wait, man. Larry, thank you.
All right, you guys be safe.
That was the interview with the legendary Larry McReynolds. Guys, honestly, within the last, 20 minutes or so of that interview, I learned more about NASCAR, genuinely more about NASCAR than I've ever learned in my entire life. And I think that's what he does so well specifically. I mean, you guys understand that Nate Kreckman and Andy Lindahl, they're also kind of noobs along with myself. Cole's the expert, obviously, but along with myself, we're learning about this sport still. And I think I don't even want to say he dumbed it down, because he didn't. He brought the genuine passion behind the sport of NASCAR, and I just literally fell in love with it all over again. Like, seeing someone talk about something so passionately and to a length and to a degree that I can understand it, it was amazing. That was something so cool to hear.
One, I got to praise the professionalism and the amount of plugs that were seamlessly thrown in there.
Seamlessly.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what time this race is, by the way, 1:30 Mountain Time this Sunday. it was plugged in a lot
True
from Larry
professional,
Mack.
like true professionalism.
Fantastic. I love listening to Larry McReynolds on NASCAR Race Hub.
Yep.
Quick shout out to there. If you guys want to learn even in more depth about cars and things like that, Larry McReynolds is the guy they always go to give in-depth analysis on anything and everything you need to know about NASCAR. And that's what I loved about this interview too. You're right. It wasn't dumbed down. It was just explained in a way to where you can enjoy the love for NASCAR.
Absolutely.
It gets you pumped up to watch NASCAR. And what I really loved that he brought up in particular is that NASCAR is going to highlight on the broadcast individual racers, one being Ryan Newman. I imagine they'll do Clint Boyer and the Kansas City Chiefs. I imagine they'll do Kevin Harvick and his talent agency representing UFC fighters, NASCAR drivers, football players.
Let's remind them, though, about Ryan Newman and why he would be highlighting him.
Yes, no, Ryan Newman, of course, if you guys don't remember, was a part of the crash in the Daytona 500 at the checkered flag.
The checkered flag lap.
Very scary incident. Nobody knew anything was happening for about 3 days until he walked out of the hospital hand in hand with his daughters.
Which was, I mean, if you didn't cry at that, I mean, seriously, come on.
It was a
tearjerker
moment for sports. It's why we love sports. We highlighted it on the Why We Love Sports segment. And Ryan Newman, just like Larry McReynolds said, 3 months later, Ryan Newman, I'm going to go ahead and say it. The dude was almost dead on a NASCAR track.
When you saw that crash, it was horrific.
There was very grim thoughts that were going through people's minds at the end of that accident. For him to come back 3 months later, to strap it all up, to give it one more go,
into the car,
to get back into the car, to do what's best for the sport, and to just do what's best for his fans.
Well,
and that selflessness from him is what I commend from Ryan Newman.
I think what's kind of topical here, and I don't want to make light of the accident. I feel like I can in a little bit just because he is okay. But it's to be topical here and talk about how in Talladega Nights, when Will Ferrell's flying through the air and he goes, "I'm in the air, this is not good." That's exactly what happened to Newman. He flew up in the air. And
you don't want to make fun of it too, but that's
exactly what happened.
That is the exact thought
what happened.
That goes through drivers' minds. And anybody who watches Talladega Nights knows if a car goes upside down,
it's
there's
not
one
good.
thought that's going through your mind. I'm not supposed to be upside down.
I'm not supposed to be here.
Now, there's other thoughts that come after that we probably can't say on air or anything like that.
No, FCC rules, yep.
Exactly. But it's wicked to see the difference from Talladega Nights in the actuality to what actually happens when a car flips over. But to also
there is a severity there.
But to also see that these cars are very safe, that these drivers are strapped in very tight,
they can't
away
move
from people.
Yeah.
It just further shows this sport is perfect to test out a return to sports, to test out what it's going to look like with no fans in the stadiums.
Totally.
Getting drivers straight from their trailers.
Literally from their trailers.
Straight to the cars.
Within 10 minutes.
He joked about this. Are they going to just put covers over them, put their heads down, say, "Come with me. Don't you look at the car. Don't you look at anybody else. You're going to get in the car and you're going to like it."
But that's what Larry said. I mean, it's literally they will be in their car 10 minutes before the race.
Yep.
That's it.
You're there to sleep,
prepping,
eat, and drive.
They're not doing anything. They're going from their trailer to the car, win the race or lose the race, whatever you want to do, and then back to their trailer.
Now, what I love, I'm really curious to see, and I know they didn't ask this on Kreckman and Lindahl because they were still learning about NASCAR and things like that, but I would want to know, what is the strategy going to be like with the driver not being able to not only just not drive his car because there's no practices, no qualifying, but he can't even touch the car. He can't feel the car. The crew chief and his entire team has to literally tell him what's going to happen as soon as you strap in, and you get maybe 5-10 laps to really think about what's going to happen with your car. And I'm curious how that changes pit strategies. If cars 100%. Come in a bit sooner just to make changes to the car.
Well, and like you said, get in a routine. You want to get in a routine.
Get in a rhythm. And another really big question is, how much of the first couple of laps will be practice for these guys? Are they going to go straight out, pedal to the metal, right into the turn one, right into the egg of the oval where rookie drivers, one, are going to mess up? Two, as we saw from races before everything ended, everybody was getting antsy at restarts, just at this beginning of races, at the end of races. And that's because of younger drivers. How are younger drivers going to adjust to all of that? That's what I wanted to get maybe deeper in analysis of.
That's what Larry said actually about this particular track is it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest of all of NASCAR, but also at the same time, he went into depth, which I loved, went into depth about how back in the day in the 50s, excuse me, in the 50s when racers would drive, they're going 80 miles an hour. Yep. 85 tops. That's the thing. They're in the 80s, and now they're going 180.
Yep.
That's so the track has not changed. The drivers, the cars, everything else has changed about the game except for the track. So when you're flying in at I'm going to put the top of the egg, I guess you could say, where the corner is much more narrow, you got to be mindful of that. And that's what the drivers, I think, are really going to be feeling out. Maybe even the first 20 laps.
And that's another question that they didn't really get to ask Larry McReynolds. How much are these simulators and all these rigs that these drivers have been in for the last month? How much is that going to play a factor? Because I've heard multiple drivers say that there isn't much of a difference in terms of how the car reacts. The only thing is you can't feel the pressure in your seat. You can't feel the car in your butt as it's hanging in the chair and you're trying to figure out, man, I'm pulling a little too far to the left.
There's always going to be a difference there.
And that's the trick. And that's what I kind of wanted to get into more detail too, is how much of that simulator is going to make a difference for drivers, one, that didn't have one, and two, drivers that had fancy simulators like Clint Boyer or Kevin Harvick, where they were literally strapping themselves into these military Air Force looking racing simulators things. And not every racer can have that in NASCAR because not everybody makes that much money.
Totally.
There's a lot of drivers that are just getting into the sport. And like Larry Mack said, there's younger drivers and younger teams that aren't as big that are going to have to bring their full crews because they don't have other options.
No, zero.
So that's other things I would really like to see is how advanced you are in the sports, how ownership changes all of that. And that's going to be really interesting to see this Sunday. But of course, like he said, tune in this Sunday. And if you don't know anything about NASCAR over the next couple of months, you will learn everything you need to know about these drivers, about the cars, about the tracks, about the whole sport in general. This is your chance to really dive into the sport and time to get hyped about the sport.
Yeah, and I think Larry McReynolds is going to do a really good job of explaining it to everybody watching. There are going to be new viewers. And guys, for the first time in weeks on weeks, we get to look forward to something other than The Last Dance. Look, The Last Dance is great. I'm looking forward to it. It's the last two episodes of it's the last dance of The Last Dance. There we go.
Last Dance.
So, but on top of that, I'm looking forward to NASCAR. I'm looking forward to something else on my Sunday, filling up my time. Thank God, filling up my time until 7 p.m. when The Last Dance comes out. I have never looked more forward, to another sporting event. Finally, just it's something that breaks up the boring routine of what quarantine life has been like for the last 2 months.
And ladies and gentlemen, I really recommend this to anybody that loves having anything on the background.
Totally.
If you love watching competition in front of you, if you love the stories of the athletes and the individual athletes that are these drivers, please tune into this race. And even for golf lovers, guys that just sit on your couch and just leave the TV on to fall asleep, this is the perfect sport for you. It's something different.
It's
just look at it as something different and opening your worldview to a whole new avenue of sports that will become more and more popular because of this.
Yeah, and it's the perfect sport simply because you don't have to pay eye-opening attention every second of every lap of every... Look, you can tune into the beginning, which honestly, the beginning of NASCAR races, from what I've learned from just this year, are fantastic. They're so well done. Obviously, it'll probably be toned back just because you're not going to have fans there, anything like that. But at the same time, from beginning, middle to end, it's fun. It's fun to watch. And it's fun to watch even in detail because, look, I've never watched a pit stop before at length, in detail, anything like that. You watch it and see what these guys do. I dare say the pit crew are all athletes. Every single one of them.
And if you look into the backgrounds of pit crew members, they were football players at D1 colleges. They go through a whole system to where these guys, not everybody in college makes the NFL, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
big
newsflash.
Shocker. I don't know if I'm bursting your bubbles. If you play college football,
breaking news,
you don't make the NFL. It's not guaranteed
in
life.
It's a 1% rate.
Exactly. So all those other athletes that have been working out their entire lives, they don't want to just go back to doing nothing.
No
for the
9 to
rest of their
5
lives.
job. Yeah.
And for literally a sport that is so big in the South, NASCAR and football, that's all Southern religion is NASCAR and football.
100%.
If you're not watching football on Sunday, you're watching NASCAR.
Yeah.
That's what Southern living is.
It's a whole lifestyle, man. And that's what I love to see about this is because I've never had this lifestyle. I've never.
It's
and
so
look,
much
it's
fun.
not. Look, it's
Embrace
honestly
this.
not.
Embrace it.
It's not what people say about it being a redneck sport at
No.
all. Like, look, I understand it comes from the South. That doesn't mean anything anymore.
No.
It genuinely is such a well-done broadcast.
Yes.
The broadcasting crew, from Dale Earnhardt to Larry McReynolds, from all these guys that I'm learning, Dale Earnhardt Jr., excuse me, from what I'm learning from these guys, it's an A1 crew, and it's so much fun to watch.
I would like to point out NASCAR, not only being on top of getting sports back with this whole Corona thing, when it comes to on-field cameras, when it comes to green screens and filling
The
out things
production
on
level.
the track and production
Totally.
level, NASCAR started a lot of this for a lot of different leagues, for Major League Baseball, NFL,
Totally.
all of these other sports. A lot of these technologies were tested out on NASCAR productions. And
Well, and look, you got to understand that NASCAR, for even if you're not familiar with it, for how big it is, look, NFL for fans being in the stadiums, look, if you go to not at Sports Authority, Empower Field now, excuse me, if you go to Empower Field now, you're looking at guys that 76,000 fills it up. You go to a NASCAR event and 200,000, 300,000 people are there. They are used to these massive productions, and they do a dang good job with the entire thing.
You go big or go home down south.
That's it. You go big or go home. And it's been so well done. That's something that I, as kind of a behind the scenes guy as well, I value that so much. I value how much production goes into making this something that's worthy of being on NBC Sports or being on TNT or wherever they broadcast that type of thing. It's super cool to actually sit back and watch that.
And Josh, before we get out of here, I want to go ahead and pick drivers. Favorite drivers to watch, driver you think will win. And I've been doing a lot of research on this just because it's finally back to NASCAR. I have no other research to do, ladies and gentlemen. I've been pouring through books of nothing but stats for NASCAR. And the last 4 out of 5 races at Darlington have all been won by Toyota cars.
Which is weird.
It's weird,
Yeah.
but I also think Toyota has a really dialed in motor and suspension and chassis system to what Darlington is and how tough of a track it is. Toyota also has some really good drivers.
Yeah.
i.e. Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Those are my 2 top favorites to win this race. I know there's other favorites, Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson, but the fact that Toyotas have been dominating Darlington, that's what's going to put them over the edge. Those are my 2 favorites. Josh, what about you?
Well, you kind of took mine. I was going to say Kyle Busch, just because of from the limited research that I've done. Obviously, I haven't gone in depth like you have, but I think the way he drives and the car he uses, like you just said, I'm literally copying you, but like what you just said, it favors him. It favors the way that he drives. And I think that's obviously going to play a huge effect to kind of giving him a boost, to be honest.
And he hasn't won a race yet all season. And I also want to point out that out of the 15 races Kyle Busch has raced at Darlington, 10 times he's finished in the top 10.
Yeah. Who was the guy his name's escaping me. Who was the Rob Gronkowski of NASCAR?
Oh, Clint Bowyer. Big
so
time,
Clint Bowyer, that's obviously another one of my favorites simply because he is the Rob Gronkowski of NASCAR. That is so cool to me.
That's the perfect comp. Yeah,
when you say like the dude likes to party. I mean, again, Talladega Nights, if you think about it, when they say, hey, I picture my Jesus in a tuxedo shirt because he likes to be formal, but he's here to party. That's Bowyer. That's what I like.
Bowyer.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And I like to make connections with guys because who doesn't like to party?
No,
Come on now.
Clint Bowyer, also, if you don't know, was the NASCAR, I want to say hillbilly, going off with the Chiefs during Super Bowl 53 when they won that. He's a massive Chiefs fan. The dude loves to go off. And if you are going to pick a driver, Clint Bowyer is another one to look at because Clint has been using those racing simulators relatively often.
Yeah.
And then he did an interview with NASCAR Race Hub. He said he would stay up till about 3 a.m. just racing different tracks with his buddies and stuff. So I'd be really curious to see how much that helps Clint Bowyer. And
for sure,
a lot of these veteran drivers that know how to adapt to those situations, that's going to help drivers like that, especially Clint Bowyer.
Look, guys, we got a lot to look forward to this weekend. I'm genuinely so excited for it. We got NASCAR coming up on Sunday, 1 p.m. Mountain Time. If you guys want to watch the pregame, it's going to be really cool. They're going to really go into depth on what the drivers are doing. And then after that, watch the full race. Go right into The Last Dance, okay? It's the final 2 episodes. We've been keeping up with it completely this entire time. Cole, I don't know if you're caught up yet.
It's a Sunday full of sports.
It's amazing. And for the first time in 2 months, it's a Sunday full of sports.
So, look,
we got so much. And obviously, we're going to break down everything next week on our episode. So guys, we hope you enjoy this weekend. We hope you have fun. As always, you guys have been listening to Weekdays with Josh and Cole. We will see you next week.